Okay, so I was going to do kind of Q&A this week, but I didn't actually get any questions, or I got one or two, I think, last night. So what I'm going to do is just do the webinar on psychology this week, and then the last week, next week, I'll just kind of dedicate to one-on-one meetings if you want to clear anything up individually. Okay, so this will be the last webinar, which is quite sad. And as you can see, I'm going to talk about psychology. And it's a broad topic, and I've talked about this quite a bit with some people one-on-one, but I thought it was important that I address my general thoughts on psychology kind of as a group, because you're not going to get very far without having to negotiate this aspect of trading. And my aim with this mentorship has been to teach you about order flow dynamics and the kinds of trades I take based on my understanding of those dynamics. But of course, every trader brings a different set of a different set of life experiences to the process, and there comes a point where data or more analysis or analytic tools won't do much to improve your edge, and you're kind of forced to start addressing your psychological issues. Maybe that's a bad way of putting it, but the psychological aspect of trading. So I have a master's degree in the psychology of mental health from the University of Edinburgh here in Scotland, where I specialised in mindfulness, and I've spent many years practicing meditation, both in and out of retreat. So I want to start by telling you a little bit about myself and my relationship with trading. So I don't think many of you are aware of this, but I actually have a chronic pain condition, which I developed about 10 years ago, and which makes it very difficult for me to hold down a kind of normal job. And it's as a result of this pain that I became interested in the mind, because really meditation was the only thing I found which helped manage the pain. But it's also one of the reasons why trading appealed to me. I never really had any interest in money, and still don't really. It's not something I particularly value. But for me, it was a relief to find a way of making a living which was flexible, which I could do from home, and which kind of allowed me control over my own time. So if I was in pain, I could take a day off, or manage my condition in the comfort of my own home without having to worry about losing my job. So, like a lot of traders, I think it's the autonomy which really appealed to me. Little did I know, of course, that trading would bring with it its own set of terrors. So today I'm going to talk about some of these issues, all of which are psychological, and hopefully you'll find something of value in my ramblings. But because I really do want you to succeed, I want for your trading to be better than it would have been had you never spent this time learning with me, and for it to be a source of wealth, a way for you to make a living, and a source of relaxation, a source of good in your life. But I also kind of hope that you leave better off as people in some way, that your mental health as a trader is in better shape, and that you leave this mentorship with a kind of healthy perspective, not just on trading, but on life and your job as a trader in general. So that being said, let's get on with it. I'm sure most of you have read Trading in the Zone, which does an amazing job at summarizing some of the more common psychological pitfalls of trading. So as a trader just starting out, you'll no doubt recognize yourself in those pages. And if you haven't read it, I'd recommend picking up a copy, and you can get a PDF online. But I want to start by playing what I still think is one of the best representations of what it's like to be a new trader and have everything you touch turn to shit. And because I still find it funny. So we'll just play this and then we'll get started.
Continuité d'homme. Temporary bottom, reversal. Pit and payant tablet flag. Put him to sleep. Load the Korea food. Make him think it's the bottom. Drop off the volume. Dump it again. Push sideways. Print 100 million Ether when he goes to sleep. 10 points peak. Load a deep. Sideways until he sleeps, then crash with the exact same Korea fold. Get Vitalik on the lane. Bon, pattern for 2, Washington wake him up. Okay. Load the flip on in trade. Crash it. Activate count on immortality. Now print 100 million Tether. We are, let him in. Copy. Kill him. Transfer everything. And you can find the notaire.
Okay, so I'm sure most of you can relate. You've probably felt like this at one time or another, just not a fucking clue what's going on, and quite frankly tortured by the market, and in a nigh on state of constant fear, basically. Fear of missing out, fear of losing. Probably one of the biggest fears is the fear of being wrong. One of those ones which is exacerbated by social media. But we feel a strong need to look good, even if it's only to ourselves. So I think it's fear which is at the root of most of the psychological issues we face as traders, and fear which makes us behave like a twat, basically. Cutting winners short, for example, snatching at profits because you're afraid of letting a winner turn into a loser. I guess this is a meme, something I made a while back. Letting losers run, another disastrous habit which ultimately stems from fear. Inching your stop away each time price comes close in the hope that your trade will kind of miraculously turn into a winner. These are all ways you blow your account. Failing to execute because you're afraid of losing, taking unplanned trades because you're afraid of missing out, holding trades for too long, revenge trading. You know, they're all cliches which you'll no doubt already be aware of, and they all stem from fear. But how do you go about actually addressing these issues? And the first step is awareness, which is why I recommend meditation. It's important for you to become aware of and understand how emotions can affect or impact your trading decisions, and then work out how you can go about creating a process or environment that helps either minimize or eliminate the impact as far as possible, because you can't fix something if you're not even aware of it. And if you want my recommendation with regard to meditation, I'd suggest starting with a guy called Stefan Pende Wormland, StephenPendeWormland. And he's got loads of free stuff on YouTube or Spotify and SoundCloud. So that's where I'd start if you're interested in pursuing that. Journaling is also invaluable, and I'm not talking about journaling trades, which is also important, of course, but journaling how you feel. So just jotting down, spending a couple of minutes, just making a note of how you felt during the course of the trading day. And if you pay attention, you'll notice that you feel fear primarily in the body. Once a threat is perceived, let's say you're you're long XRP, okay, or some other shitcoin, this area in your brain, the amygdala, what it does, it sets off a chain reaction which will increase your heart rate. It shuts down your digestive system, so you will lose your appetite, stop eating. Your muscles will become tense. You might feel nauseous or get butterflies in your stomach, and your mouth will become dry. And you'll notice that even though you're just sitting there like a top nerd staring at charts, your body is really ready for action. It's in a state of high alert, and cortisol, which is sometimes referred to as the stress hormone, that's flooding through your body. And cortisol can have some really bad consequences for your physical health over the long term. But it will for sure fuck up your trading. And if you've ever felt anxious as a result of trading, cortisol is the reason why. Okay. And it also impairs your judgment. So a little bit like a horse with blinkers on, your attention narrows, and what happens is you become practically kind of incapable of making well-informed decisions because you're so focused on the threat in front of you. In this case, your XRP position, which you likely perceive as a threat to both your trading account and your ego, and quite rightly so. This is just a screenshot from a while back, and forgive me if you're in XRP right now. I'm just taking the piss. But the point is that it's been blindingly obvious for a while now that XRP and the alt market as a whole has been trending down, and yet people keep longing it, which is fine, except they hold out for totally unrealistic targets. Mainly, I think, as a result of something called confirmation bias, which is one of the many mental blind spots we have to be aware of as traders. All confirmation biases is a tendency to ignore inconvenient information. So in this case, the fact that XRP has been grinding down for months, and to actively seek out and cling to any information which supports our belief that we're onto a winner, even if it's kind of a figment of our imagination. So our belief that the bottom's in, basically, because we're afraid of being wrong. And confirmation bias makes us blind to the threat of loss. And I think this is the large part of why people move their stops down and end up taking massive losses, because they're convinced they're right. Yeah, Alex, this describes the XRP army. Yeah. It's kind of a confirmation bias on a mass, an almost hysterical level. It's also worth noting that cortisol activates the hippocampus, which is a part of the brain which is responsible for the kind of consolidation of long-term memory. So let's say we get stopped out here. Whenever we take a loss like that, the stress response which results from that loss is strengthened, which means that next time we encounter the same scenario, in this case, long XRP in a downtrend, we're going to be even more afraid, okay? And thus a quite disastrous negative feedback loop is born. So the first step in kind of short circuiting this negative feedback loop, I think, is just to cut back on size. Thinking about winning and losing, and especially about winning and losing money, can really interfere with your ability to execute trades and manage them effectively. So it's going to cloud your judgment, and as I've just explained, each time you lose money, you're effectively kind of feeding that negative cycle. And of course, early experiences in whatever it is you're doing, early experiences of loss, that can be quite formative. So it makes sense that while you're developing as a trader, you only risk a really inconsequential amount, so an amount of money you wouldn't really think twice about losing. That's the first step in eliminating fear. Trade small, and I mean really small, because that will allow you to refine your process and build trust and confidence in the expectancy of that process over time, without kind of exacerbating that stress response and trapping you in a cycle of fear, basically. So that's really important. So that quite kind of practical point out of the way. The next step is practice, and I've said it before, but I'll just say it again. Just like any other performance-based activity, to become a successful trader, you have to engage in structured practice. By which I mean repeated, constant, intense structured practice and experience in a variety of market conditions. Because basically the unknown represents danger, something to be afraid of. So you need to practice in order to kind of root out or uncover all those unknown variables, and it's through that process that you'll build confidence in your process, and then you'll have conviction in your actions. You'll be able to recognize process and then execute trades without having to think about it, because you'll have, I hope, an intimate knowledge of all the variables involved in any given setup, and an almost intuitive feel for how price should behave under different market conditions. Because as I explained a few weeks ago, it's not enough to know that you should be buying dips when the market is bullish. You have to actively practice doing this, because of course buying dips is scary. Alex is asking, does backtesting count as practice? It's not quite what I mean as when I say practice. By practice, I don't just mean kind of running back through price and observing historical price action and checking whether or not a system has a positive expectancy. What I mean when I say practice is actually engaging with the market. So whether that's on a demo account or with some like nominal insignificant position, you want to be engaging with the market so that you get a feel for what it's like to be in a position under different circumstances. Okay. Just like any other process, let's say you're I don't know, let's say you're a professional football player, right? What you'll do is run through drills so that you by the time it comes to match day, you've already practiced all of these different kind of aspects of the game. You're prepared for every scenario. So you've got a game plan, but you've also drilled it. Does that make sense? So it's not just about back testing, it's about kind of defining the setups and then practice trading them, practice the execution, practice the trade management, get a feel for what it's like to be in a position. And that's how you build it's not a muscle memory, but it's kind of akin to muscle memory. Okay. For example, let's say you want to be buying dips, okay, because the market's bullish. You have to practice that, because when price is shitting itself into your level, it really doesn't feel like the probabilities are in your favor. But with enough practice, you'll you'll come to recognize that there's no need to be afraid here. You'll build that confidence, and of course, price rallies. So I'm also a tattoo artist, just kind of part-time, and when I first started practicing, I had to go through a very similar process, and it's quite scary with tattooing, because you've only got one pass really, or a couple of passes for a tattoo, one shot at getting it right, and whatever you produce, whoever it is, that's going to be on their body forever. So when I first started, I'd get clammy hands. My hands would shake. I'd get butterflies in my stomach, all of which just made the job harder. And as a result of my fear of fucking up, I was reluctant to go too deep with the needle. But the thing is that when you're doing a tattoo, if you don't commit, if you don't get deep enough in the skin, the line's going to look really weak, and most of the ink's probably going to fall out when it heals. So it's counterintuitive, but a little bit like trading, the more afraid you are of making a mistake, the more likely it is that you'll end up with a bad tattoo, or a losing trade or series of trades. So to really trust in the process takes practice, and in the case of tattooing, practice on all different parts of the body, on different people with different needle groupings. And it's the same with trading. You have to train yourself to execute in environments which make you scared. And so now, after having been through this process myself, I'm really no longer afraid of buying a fuck off red candle. I'd actually be a lot more nervous about selling into a move like that, because I know what the likely outcome is on a very kind of intuitive level. So although the market has this kind of illusory quality, assimilating, by which I mean training or practicing with the technical knowledge which I've been trying to teach, should go a long way in counteracting that fear. And pull up a footprint chart, and you can literally see fear in the market, people slinging massive sides at tops and bottoms. But it's extremely rare that I chase price now, because I know almost in my bones that the probabilities aren't in my favor, and that's because I've drilled it, I've practiced it. So another thing to remember is that it really is all about expectancy. You're not wrong on one trade. The outcome of any one trade is really irrelevant. You're wrong over a series of trades. And I'm sure you all know by now what expectancy is, but let me just type out in case any of you need reminding. So expectancy is it's your average win. That's not how you spell that. Average win times the probability of that being a win, minus your average loss times probability of loss. Okay, that's expectancy. So it's not about being right, it's about putting the probabilities in your favor so that you come out on top over the long run. So it will vary between people, but do whatever you can to keep this at the front of your mind. For some of you, it will just be practice. And for others, keeping statistics, metrics like win-loss ratio, expectancy, keeping track of those will go a long way in helping you avoid making important trading decisions out of fear. For example, you might know a setup has a positive expectancy over time, but if you don't keep this in mind, and if the last time you took that setup you lost money, it may be that you're afraid to take the same setup next time it crops up, and so you fail to execute as a result of fear. And that's another fear-based cognitive bias called the recency effect, in which our mind weighs the latest or more recent information with greater importance than other data when making decisions. Okay. So if you're feeling reluctant to take a trade because you've had, let's say, 3 losers in a row, knowing that your trade setup has a win rate of 60%, just for example, can help you remember that you're trading the odds, and the fact that the last trade you took was a loser is not a reason to avoid trading it when it next shows up. That being said, I think no matter how many stats you keep or how much practice you get, it's of course impossible to escape uncertainty. And sometimes it seems like whatever we do, it's always this uncertainty, this ambiguity or variance, which has the last say on whether or not we make money. And of course, we can never say for sure that the market will or will not do something. But for most traders, and doing this mentorship, I've found that, usually they're the kind of people who value knowledge and the sense of order and control which knowledge brings them. If I were to typecast the kind of person who takes this mentorship, that would be it. But uncertainty is very difficult to come to terms with. Most traders can tell you what the market should do or why it did X or Y after the fact, but they find it very difficult to adapt to the market in real time. They can't admit to being wrong when it does something unexpected, because I think being wrong poses a threat to their sense of control, their sense of order. They're unable to come to terms with the fact that they're essentially playing a game of probabilities, and that those probabilities are constantly shifting. And if you want to succeed, you have to come to terms with that. So this used to be me. It's not my chart. They didn't look all that unlike this one. I used to have all this shit on my charts because I couldn't bear the possibility of being wrong. I was continually trying to maintain an obviously illusory sense of control in circumstances where control just wasn't possible. Because the fact is, we can never know the outcome of a trade. So for me, it used to be the case that everything had to have an explanation. I required a causal relationship between what I knew and what the market was doing. And the danger here is that you develop the illusion of control, a belief which makes you risk more than you should, and which will make you insensitive to feedback and therefore unable to learn or adapt. So that illusion of control will make you less effective at analyzing the markets and less capable of effective risk management. But perhaps even worse, seeking out or relying on that sense of control can lead to what's called learned helplessness, which is one of the main reasons I think why most traders fail. And for anyone not familiar with what that is, learned helplessness was a term coined by a guy called Martin Seligman, who conducted a series of rather cruel experiments on dogs. So it's a little unclear here, but I hope you can make that out. The dogs in this experiment were placed on an electric grid, shock producing floor, and given shocks. And of course, when they felt the shock, they jumped out of that chamber and into a safe chamber chamber which wasn't electrified. However, how they set it up, half of the dogs were tied up here in the shock producing chamber, so they were unable to escape. And what they found is that in subsequent exposures to shock, in which all of the dogs were unrestrained and free to jump into a safe chamber, the dogs which were tied up in the first half of the experiment did nothing. Okay, so that's learned helplessness. In the first half of the experiment, half of the dogs were tied up, making them unable to escape this painful chamber. And so they learned that they were helpless. And as a result, even when they were free to jump into a new chamber, they just stayed where they were. And it's the same process by which circus elephants are trained, by the way. What they do is tie them up while they're young. And they learn that they can't escape their circumstances, so that even when they're grown up and they're fully capable of kind of ripping out whatever constraint is holding them down, they don't do it. So that's learned helplessness. And for a trader who focuses on what's called primary control strategies, but I mean strategies in which you're kind of trying to control the external environment. For these people, the slow realization that you have no control over whether or not you succeed can be totally crushing. And this realization will lead to chronic stress and a rise in cortisol levels, which make failure even more likely. So it's really important that you maintain a sense of control. Okay, a feeling that the effort and work you put in have some meaningful impact on the outcome. But of course, the market does whatever the fuck it wants. So from where do you derive this sense of control is the question. And the key, I think, is to assume what's called an internal locus of control. In other words, to focus on secondary control strategies in which you exert control over yourself, okay, in which you adapt to the external environment rather than trying to control or to exert control over it. Does that make sense? So, variance is real, unpredictability is real. We're playing a game of probabilities, and we can't do much about that, but we can control our actions to some extent. We can control how we think about and interact with the market. So it's really very important to shift your attention away from the goal or outcome of your trades, the reward, and to focus on refining your process. And that's why refining a process is so important, not because that's why you get the reward, but because that's how you maintain that internal locus of control. That's what's called a secondary control strategy, or you're exerting control over yourself and how you interact with the market, rather than trying to maintain that illusory sense of control over something which you clearly don't have control over, like Bitcoin. And the same with routine. That's why routine is so important. Routine will give you it will give you that sense of control or agency. But that being said, the fact is that trading is stressful, and trust me, you really don't want to spend your life stuck in front of a computer screen just to end up a toxic wreck of a human with no money, which is sadly how a lot of traders end up. And this is just a post I kind of stumbled across in a forum a while back, and for some reason it just kind of struck a chord with me. There was this girl I loved. I would follow her to the end of the world back in the day. Now I don't even pick up the phone when she calls. I can't be distracted from how my stocks are doing. I feel very numb at times. Hope it changes when I make my millions and retire. So you really don't want to end up like this. It's kind of a sad truth that most traders come for the freedom and stay for the cheap dopamine rush, often working what in any other arena would be considered kind of insane hours for a wage which isn't even guaranteed. And I get a lot of people message me describing it as a passion for the art or craft of trading, but more often than not, I suspect it's a kind of addiction. In fact, I'm sure of that. So I want to just make sure, while we're on the subject of psychology, that none of you are at risk of kind of straying into addiction. So if you could, it would be great if after the webinar, you could just run through these questions. They're actually from the Gamblers Anonymous website, but you can just replace the word gambling with trading, and just let me know how you get on, because it's one of the risks here, and it's extremely serious. Okay. Because if you keep making the same mistakes over and over again, or you feel stuck or unable to change your trading habits, it's quite possible, quite likely that you're stuck in a dopamine-driven feedback loop. You probably already know that dopamine is released when you experience pleasure, kind of pleasure chemical, but it's also released when you anticipate pleasure, or when you predict or expect reward. And when your dopamine levels spike, when they increase, so does your motivation to act. So you're more likely to jump into stupid trades or make impulsive decisions. And I think this is why some traders manifest a kind of delusional confidence which compels them to trade despite mounting losses. It's they're deriving that dopamine from, not from winning money, but from just the anticipation of or prospect of winning money, even when it's unlikely. So that's a kind of addiction, and it's a vicious downward spiral which leads to a very bad place. Anyway, I don't want to put a downer on it, but I just thought that was important to mention. So just some general advice: don't run yourself into the ground. If you're in bed on your laptop or your phone at 10 or 11 at night, you're doing it wrong. If you're waking up to alarm alerting you to the fact that Bitcoin's crossed 10K or whatever, you're doing it wrong. If the first thing you do is check your phone for charts in the morning, you're also doing it wrong. Okay. You want to make trading a part of your life, not life itself. And there was a time in my life where everything I looked at resembled a chart. You might have experienced this. I'd look at a mountain range and see a Bitcoin chart, or I'd be walking past the Gothic University building or the museum here in Glasgow and see fucking pound dollar, and it's just not healthy. Take time off, take care of yourself, eat well, whatever that means to you. Get some fresh air, have fun, get a good night's sleep, spend time with friends and family. Just common sense stuff which will put you in a good place from which you can sit down at the charts in the morning, happy and relaxed. And it's in that state that you'll be ready to perform. Think of it as a performance-based activity, a bit like an athlete or something like that. Okay, athletes aren't up at 2 a.m. staring at their phone. They're getting a good night's sleep. They're eating well. They've got some kind of healthy balance. They work hard. They're rewarded for it, but they're not going to succeed if they stray into that kind of, this kind of toxic behavior. And if you do this, your general well-being will improve, and you'll find yourself in a kind of positive feedback loop in which each element of your life kind of takes care of the others. And to some extent, I think all it requires is that you just relax. And I think for some of you, this is the key. You want it too badly. And there's a nice kind of analogy in meditation here. I can't remember who it was, but they conducted a series of interviews with people who claim to be enlightened or to have had so-called enlightenment experiences. And the one thing they all had in common was that they'd worked for it and they'd worked extremely hard, but that the experience itself had only happened eventually when they kind of gave up on it. And I think there's something almost magic in trying really hard at something and then not giving up, but kind of letting go, so that when you've put in the effort, when you've acquired the knowledge and you've done the practice, try and kind of relax, just back off a bit, and I'm confident that things will start to click for you. So that's just about all I've got to say today. But I wanted to just leave you with the advice of my namesake, Tilopa. There he is. He was a Mahasiddha in the Kagyu lineage, which is kind of Tibetan tradition, whose advice to aspiring meditators was: don't recall, don't imagine, don't think, don't examine, don't control, and rest. Relax right now and rest. And I think that's the key. Anyway, I hope those rambles have been somewhat useful. And if you've got any questions about anything I've covered today, or you're concerned about something I mentioned, just let me know. So as I say, last week is next week, and there won't be a webinar. So what I'll probably do is just commit a few days to one-on-one. So I'll block off a chunk of time and send out a need to meet invite, and you can book a time if you want to meet up. Okay. I'd also love your feedback. It's been a real pleasure working with you, and I hope you've got something value out of this experience. So it would be wonderful if you could just write just a few lines in support, and so that other people know what to expect. Just a kind of very short testimonial. I'd really appreciate that. But apart from that, just let me know if you have any final questions, and you're more than welcome to contact me after this week or next if you want any more support with anything we've covered over the past few months after the mentorship's over. Okay. All right, guys. So I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll speak to you soon.